Come home with me. A Hell's Angel found a paralyzed poor woman at the bus stop. Then took her. The rain drummed against Duke's helmet as he leaned into another curve, his motorcycle's tires fighting for grip on the slick asphalt. Lightning flashed across the dark sky, followed by a deep rumble of thunder that he felt in his chest. His leather jacket was soaked through, and cold water trickled down his neck. Duke squinted through the wall of rain, his headlight cutting a weak path through the darkness. The weather had turned brutal fast, catching him off guard on his way home from the repair shop. His thick hands, decorated with faded tattoos, gripped the handlebars tighter as the bike wobbled slightly on the wet road. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. That's when he saw her, a lone figure huddled at the bus stop, barely visible through the downpour. As he drew closer, the sight made his heart clench. A young woman sat in a wheelchair, trying desperately to shield herself from the rain with nothing but a thin jacket. She was already drenched, her dark hair plastered to her face, and her hands trembled as she gripped the wheels of her chair. Duke slowed his bike, wrestling with himself. He wasn't the type to get involved in other people's problems. That's how he'd lived since Sarah died, keeping to himself, avoiding complications. But something about the woman's isolation, her vulnerability in this savage weather, stirred something deep inside him that he thought he'd buried years ago. The woman looked up as his motorcycle rumbled closer, and Duke caught a glimpse of her face, beautiful despite being rain-soaked, with eyes that held both strength and exhaustion. She tried to push herself further under the small shelter of the bus stop, but the wind drove the rain sideways, offering no real protection. Duke felt the weight of his past pressing down on him. He remembered another rainy night, another person he couldn't help. His hands tightened on the handlebars until his knuckles turned white beneath his tattoos. The rational part of him screamed to keep going, to mind his own business. But he couldn't. Not this time. He guided his bike to the curb, cutting the engine. The sudden silence made the rainfall seem even louder. The woman watched him warily as he dismounted, his boots splashing in the puddles as he approached the bus stop. Water ran down his beard, and his leather vest gleamed wet in the dim light. Duke knew he must look intimidating, a huge, tattooed biker emerging from the darkness. The Hell's Angels patch on his back didn't help matters. The woman tensed visibly, her hands gripping her wheelchair's arms more tightly. "Bus ain't coming," he said gruffly, his voice barely carrying over the storm. "Next one's not for hours." He'd seen the schedule posted on the shelter's wall. The woman didn't respond, but Duke saw her shiver violently. Her clothes were completely soaked through, and her lips had taken on a bluish tinge. Something in his chest ached at the sight. "Look," he said, trying to soften his naturally rough voice. "I've got a truck parked not far from here. I can give you a ride wherever you need to go." He gestured at the wheelchair. "We can make it work." The woman hesitated, studying him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Another crack of thunder made her jump, and more rain whipped through the shelter. "You can't stay out here," Duke added, surprising himself with the gentle concern in his voice. "Nobody should be left alone in weather like this." Anna wrapped her arms tightly around herself, studying the massive figure before her. Despite his intimidating appearance, there was something in his eyes that didn't match his rough exterior. They were kind eyes, touched with a sadness she recognized all too well. She started, her teeth chattering. "I don't want to be any trouble." Duke shook his head, rain dripping from his beard. "Already out here. Ain't no trouble." He gestured toward a red pickup truck parked about 50 feet away. "Let me help you get settled." Anna nodded slowly, her resistance crumbling in the face of the relentless storm. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice nearly lost in the rain. Duke moved behind her wheelchair with surprising gentleness for such a big man. "Gonna push you to the truck, if that's okay?" He waited for her nod before carefully guiding her through the puddles. At the truck, Duke opened the passenger door and positioned the wheelchair perfectly. "I'll help you in, but you tell me if anything hurts or feels wrong, okay?" "I can manage most of it," Anna said, though her arms trembled with cold and exhaustion. She showed him how to support her as she transferred herself from the wheelchair to the seat, his strong hands steady and respectful. Once she was settled, Duke efficiently folded her wheelchair and secured it in the truck bed, covering it with a tarp to keep it dry. The truck's cabin felt like heaven after the bitter cold outside, and Anna couldn't help but sink into the worn leather seat. Duke climbed in and started the engine, cranking up the heat. "I'm Duke," he said, his voice gruff but gentle. "Duke Carver." "Anna Everhart," she replied, rubbing her cold hands together. "Thank you for stopping. Most people just drive by." Duke grunted softly, pulling away from the curb. "Where am I taking you?" Anna's hands stilled in her lap, and she stared out at the rain-slicked streets. The silence stretched between them until she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't really have anywhere to go." Duke's hands tightened on the steering wheel, but he remained quiet, giving her space to continue. "I was in a car accident 8 months ago," Anna said, her fingers twisting in her wet shirt. "The paralysis is permanent. I lost my apartment when I couldn't work anymore, and my insurance—" She trailed off, swallowing hard. "I've been staying at shelters when I can, but they're usually full." The windshield wipers squeaked rhythmically as Duke processed her words. "Family?" he asked softly. Anna shook her head, a bitter smile touching her lips. "My sister made it clear she couldn't handle the burden of caring for me. My parents passed years ago. She hadn't meant to share so much, but something about Duke's quiet presence made the words flow. I was an artist before, had my own gallery showings and everything. Now I can barely afford art supplies, let alone a place to stay." Duke drove in silence for a moment, his face troubled in the dim light of the dashboard. "Been sleeping rough?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. "When I have to," Anna admitted, her voice small. "The shelters do their best, but—" She wiped at her eyes, disguising it as brushing away water from the rain. "I'm sorry. I don't usually dump my problems on strangers." The windshield wipers kept their steady rhythm as Duke's truck wound through the darkening streets, leaving the town behind. Anna watched as streetlights grew fewer and farther between, replaced by dense trees on either side of the road. The rain drummed against the roof, creating a cocoon of sound around them. Duke drove carefully, taking the curves with consideration for his passenger. Every now and then, he'd glance at Anna, checking to make sure she was comfortable. The heat from the vents had finally chased away the worst of the chill, and her clothes were starting to dry. The truck turned onto a narrow gravel driveway, tires crunching over the wet stones. Through the rain-streaked window, Anna made out the shape of a small house, nestled among tall pines. A single light burned in what looked like a kitchen window, casting a warm glow into the darkness. "It ain't much," Duke said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "But it's dry, and there's a good bed you can use." Anna's hands twisted in her lap. "I couldn't possibly—" "You can," Duke cut in, his tone gentle but firm. "Storm's getting worse. Ain't right to leave you out in it." He pulled the truck up close to a covered porch that wrapped around the front of the house. The headlights illuminated weathered wood siding and simple curtains in the windows. It wasn't fancy, but something about it felt solid, dependable, like Duke himself. "Let me get the door open first," Duke said, killing the engine. "Then I'll come back for you and your chair." Anna watched as he jogged through the rain to the front door, fishing keys from his jacket pocket. The porch light flickered on, and she could see more details now. A wooden bench against the wall, some potted plants that had seen better days, a worn welcome mat. Duke returned with an umbrella, which he held over Anna while he helped her transfer from the truck to her wheelchair. His movements were careful, patient, giving her time to adjust herself. Despite his intimidating size, there was nothing frightening about his presence. The wheelchair rolled smoothly up a ramp that ran alongside the porch steps. Anna noticed it was well maintained, though it looked like it hadn't been used in some time. She wondered about its story, but didn't ask. Inside, the house was modest but clean. The living room held a comfortable-looking couch, a coffee table with some motorcycle magazines, and a TV that seemed rarely used. A doorway led to a kitchen where copper pots hung from a rack, and the smell of coffee lingered in the air. "Spare rooms down the hall," Duke said, running a hand through his wet beard. "Bathroom's right next to it. Everything's set up so you can reach it easy." He paused, then added softly, "My wife. She was in a chair too before she passed. Haven't changed much since then." The simple statement hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken grief. Anna felt the weight of his trust in sharing even that small piece of information. "I don't want to impose," she said quietly, though the thought of a real bed made her throat tight with longing. Duke shook his head. "Ain't an imposition. House has been too quiet for too long anyway." He gestured down the hallway. "Stay the night. We can figure out the rest tomorrow." Anna looked up at this giant of a man, with his tattoos and his leather vest, who had shown more kindness in one evening than she'd experienced in months. "Thank you," she whispered, meaning it with every fiber of her being. Sunlight filtered through unfamiliar curtains, casting gentle shadows on the walls. Anna blinked, taking in the peaceful quiet of the spare room. The bed was more comfortable than anything she'd slept on in months, and for a moment she just lay there, savoring the feeling of being safe and warm. The room showed signs of careful preparation, despite its simplicity. Everything was positioned at the right height for someone in a wheelchair. The light switches, the modified dresser, even the closet rod had been lowered. It spoke of someone who understood her needs intimately. From the kitchen came the gentle clatter of pots and pans, along with the rich aroma of coffee. Anna carefully maneuvered herself into her wheelchair, grateful for the sturdy grab bars installed beside the bed. After freshening up in the accessible bathroom, she wheeled herself toward the kitchen. Duke stood at the stove, his massive frame somehow making the space seem smaller. He wore a faded black t-shirt that showed his tattooed arms, and his long hair was tied back. He turned at the sound of her wheels on the hardwood floor. "Morning," he said, his gruff voice softer than the night before. "Hope you like eggs and bacon. Coffee's ready too." "That sounds wonderful," Anna replied, wheeling up to the table where Duke had already cleared a space for her chair. He moved around the kitchen with surprising grace, placing a steaming mug of coffee within her reach. The silence between them was awkward, but not uncomfortable, as he finished cooking and brought 2 loaded plates to the table. "I haven't had a home-cooked breakfast in—" Anna paused, stirring cream into her coffee. "Well, I can't remember how long." Duke sat down across from her, his large frame making the kitchen chair look small. "Used to cook all the time," he said. "For the club. For Sarah, my wife." Anna wrapped her hands around the warm mug. How long ago did you lose her? 5 years. Duke pushed his eggs around his plate. Cancer. Went quick at the end. He looked up, meeting Anna's eyes. That's when I left the Angels. Couldn't stomach the life anymore without her. Anna nodded, understanding loss all too well. I used to be an artist, she offered in return. Had a little studio downtown, taught classes sometimes. I was working on getting my first gallery showing when the accident happened. You still paint? Duke asked. She shook her head, looking down at her hands. Haven't touched a brush since. It's different now. Everything's different. She took a shaky breath. Some days I can barely manage the basics, let alone create art. Must be hard, Duke said simply, no pity in his voice, just understanding. The worst part isn't the wheelchair, Anna continued, surprising herself with her honesty. It's feeling like I've lost my purpose. My family. They tried to help at first, but they couldn't handle it. My sister especially. She just wanted me to be normal again. Duke nodded, his face thoughtful. Know something about that. After Sarah, the club wanted me back in the fold, but I couldn't be that person anymore. Lost my taste for the violence, the chaos. He rubbed his beard. They called me the Bear back then. Wasn't just for my size, had a temper to match. And now? Anna asked softly. Now I fix bikes, keep to myself mostly. He gave a small, self-deprecating smile. Guess we've both lost our old lives, one way or another. They ate in companionable silence for a few moments, the morning sun warming the kitchen. The simple act of sharing breakfast, of speaking their truths without judgment, created a tentative bond between them. After breakfast, the day unfolded with a gentle rhythm that felt both strange and comforting to them both. Duke moved through the house with purpose, showing Anna where everything was kept, plates in the lower cabinets, cups within easy reach, and fresh towels in the bathroom closet. Made some changes last night, Duke explained, demonstrating how he'd rearranged things. Figure it might make things easier for you. His voice was gruff but kind, and Anna felt a warmth spread through her chest at his thoughtfulness. As Anna helped fold laundry at the kitchen table, she watched Duke work on dinner preparations. His large hands, covered in faded tattoos, moved with surprising delicacy as he chopped vegetables. You didn't have to do all this, Anna said softly, smoothing a wrinkle from a freshly laundered shirt. Duke shrugged, his broad shoulders rising and falling. Needed doing anyway. He paused, knife hovering over an onion. Been a long time since this place felt like more than just walls and a roof. Throughout the afternoon, they shared pieces of their stories between mundane tasks. Anna spoke about the night of her accident, a rainy road, a drunk driver, the screeching of tires. Duke listened without interruption, his presence steady and anchoring. First few months I was angry all the time, she admitted, wheeling herself to the sink to help with dishes. Kept thinking about all the things I'd never do again. Duke handed her a dish towel. Anger's easier than grief sometimes. Is that what happened with the Angels? Anna asked, carefully drying a plate. Duke was quiet for a long moment, his hands submerged in soapy water. After Sarah died, I got real dark. Started taking bigger risks, picking fights. Club brothers tried to help, but... He shook his head. One night, I nearly killed a man in a bar fight. That's when I knew I had to leave. The afternoon light softened into evening, and Duke suggested they sit out on the porch. He helped Anna navigate the slight step, making sure her wheelchair was secure on the wooden boards. The air was cool and clean after yesterday's rain. Stars began to appear in the darkening sky, pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. They sat in comfortable silence, Duke in an old wooden chair beside Anna's wheelchair. Used to paint the night sky, Anna said, her voice barely above a whisper. Could never quite get the stars right, though. They always looked too flat on canvas. Duke nodded, looking up at the constellation-scattered sky. Sarah loved the stars, used to drag me out camping just to look at them. His voice caught slightly. Haven't watched them since she passed. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with understanding, with the weight of shared pain and the tentative hope of healing. The cricket song and distant owl calls wrapped around them like a blanket, and for the first time in a long while, neither of them felt quite so alone. They stayed there, two broken people finding comfort in each other's presence, as the stars continued their ancient dance above them. The moment held all their unspoken words, their losses, their fears, and the unexpected solace they'd found in each other's company. The old pickup truck rumbled down the country road, its worn suspension creaking with every bump. Duke glanced sideways at Anna, who sat quietly watching the passing scenery. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, but he noticed how they occasionally twitched, as if wanting to reach out and touch the world beyond the window. Store's not much, Duke said, breaking the comfortable silence. But they've got the basics. Anna smiled, turning to face him. After living on the streets, basics sound pretty wonderful to me. The small general store came into view, its faded sign creaking in the morning breeze. Duke parked close to the entrance, making sure there was enough room on the passenger side for Anna's wheelchair. Before he could get out to help, Anna had already opened her door. I can manage this part, she said firmly, though not unkindly. Duke watched as she expertly maneuvered herself from the truck seat to her wheelchair, her movements practiced and precise. Inside the store, Anna insisted on pushing her own chair, declining Duke's offer to help. She navigated the narrow aisles with determination, even when the wheels caught on uneven floorboards. Duke followed a few steps behind, grabbing items from higher shelves when needed, but otherwise letting her lead the way. Could you reach those paper towels? Anna asked, pointing to a high shelf. As Duke stretched to grab them, she added, But I'll carry them. She balanced the package carefully on her lap, along with the other items she'd collected. Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly store owner, watched them from behind the counter with curious eyes. Duke knew what it must look like. Him, with his tattoos and leather vest, following this beautiful wheelchair-bound woman around his regular store. But Anna paid no attention to the stares, focused entirely on her task. We need eggs, Anna announced, consulting her mental list. And maybe some fresh vegetables if they have any. They keep the eggs in the back, Duke said. The floor's pretty rough back there. Anna's jaw set in that stubborn way he was beginning to recognize. I can handle rough floors, Duke. And she did, though Duke couldn't help but wince at every bump and jolt. She selected the eggs carefully, checking each carton for cracks, before placing them securely in her lap. At the checkout, Anna insisted on paying her share, pulling out carefully counted bills from a small purse. Duke noticed how few bills remained but said nothing, respecting her pride. The drive home was peaceful, the morning sun warming the truck's cab. Anna hummed softly to herself, something Duke had noticed she did when she was content. The shopping bags sat between them on the seat, a simple testament to their shared domesticity. Back at the house, Duke carried the groceries inside while Anna wheeled herself up the ramp he'd built yesterday. He watched as she immediately began organizing their purchases, her movements efficient and purposeful in his kitchen. A kitchen that hadn't seen such care in years. The morning light streamed through the windows, catching dust motes in its beams. But the dust seemed less heavy now, the shadows less dark. Anna's wheelchair left clean tracks in the morning light, like pathways through his solitude. Her quiet humming drifted from the kitchen, filling the empty spaces of his home with gentle sound. Duke stood in the doorway, watching her work. His chest felt tight with an unfamiliar feeling, a mixture of protectiveness and something deeper he wasn't ready to name. He pushed the feeling down, but it remained there, warm and insistent, like the sunlight that now filled his once dark home. The morning sun filtered through the threadbare curtains, rousing Anna from her sleep. She blinked, taking a moment to orient herself in the unfamiliar guest room. The sound of metal clinking against metal drifted through her window. Curious, she pulled herself into her wheelchair and made her way to look outside. Duke was already up, his massive frame bent over his motorcycle. Tools were scattered around him on an old blanket, and his hands moved with practiced precision as he worked on the engine. His usual leather vest was draped over a nearby chair, leaving him in a grease-stained white t-shirt that stretched across his broad shoulders. Anna wheeled herself out onto the porch, the screen door creaking behind her. "Good morning," she called out. Duke looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Mornin'." His voice was gruff but not unkind. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I have in months," Anna admitted. She moved closer to where he worked, genuinely interested in what he was doing. "Need any help?" Duke's shoulders tensed slightly. "Nah, I got it covered." He turned back to the bike, his movements more rigid than before. Anna felt the familiar sting of rejection, but pushed it aside. "I used to help my dad with his car," she offered. Before everything. I know my way around an engine." Duke paused, his hands hovering over the motorcycle. She could see the conflict in his expression, the desire to be kind warring with his uncertainty about how to treat her. Finally, he shook his head. "It's pretty heavy work. Wouldn't want you to—" He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. "To what?" Anna's voice was quiet but firm. "Get hurt? Get dirty? I'm paralyzed, Duke, not made of glass." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. But before he could respond, Anna wheeled herself back toward the house. "I'll make us some coffee instead." In the kitchen, Anna busied herself with the coffee maker, trying to ignore the frustration bubbling up inside her. She understood his hesitation. Most people treated her differently after the accident. But something about Duke's reluctance hurt more than usual. The morning passed slowly. Duke worked on his bike while Anna cleaned up around the house, needing to feel useful. By late afternoon, the smell of motor oil and coffee had mixed with the warm summer air. Duke found her on the porch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He cleared his throat, and Anna turned to face him. "Been thinking," he said, leaning against the porch railing. "This place, it's too big for just me, and winter's coming." He scratched his beard, obviously uncomfortable. "What I'm trying to say is, you could stay, if you wanted to, not just for a few days, but, you know." Anna's heart skipped a beat. The offer was unexpected, and she could see how much it had cost him to make it. The kindness of it made her throat tight with emotion. But then the familiar doubts crept in. She thought about the way he'd dismissed her help that morning, about how her presence would complicate his life, about the countless things she needed help with, whether she liked to admit it or not. "Duke, she started, her voice wavering. The words stuck in her throat as she struggled between gratitude and fear. Her hands gripped her wheelchair's armrests tightly, knuckles turning white with the effort of holding back her emotions. The morning light streamed through the windows of Duke's house, catching dust motes that danced in the air. Anna sat at her easel by the window, her paintbrush moving in confident strokes across the canvas. She had set up her makeshift studio in the corner of the living room, where the natural light was best. Duke watched her from his armchair, pretending to read the newspaper. There was something mesmerizing about the way she worked, her face scrunched in concentration, completely lost in her art. The walls of his house, once bare and lifeless, now displayed several of her paintings, splashes of color that made the place feel more like a home than it had in years. "You're staring again," Anna said without looking up from her work. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Duke cleared his throat and rustled his newspaper. "Just wondering what you're painting this time." "The view from your porch," she replied, reaching for another brush. "The way the sun hits the trees in the morning. It's beautiful." Duke grunted in response, but his chest tightened at her words. It had been so long since anyone had found beauty in this place. The house had been his sanctuary, his hiding place from the world. Now, with Anna here, it was becoming something else entirely. She wheeled herself backward to get a better view of her work, leaving a small streak of blue paint on her cheek. Without thinking, Duke stood up and walked over to her, pulling his handkerchief from his pocket. "You've got paint." He gestured to his own cheek. Anna reached up to wipe it away, but missed the spot entirely. Duke hesitated for a moment, then gently dabbed at the paint with his handkerchief. The tender gesture hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. "Thanks," Anna whispered, her eyes meeting his briefly before returning to her canvas. Duke retreated to the kitchen, needing space to breathe. These small moments of intimacy were becoming more frequent, and they stirred something in him he thought he'd buried long ago. He began pulling out pots and pans, making more noise than necessary as he started preparing lunch. As he reached for the flower in the top cabinet, a worn photograph fluttered to the floor. Duke's heart stopped when he saw it. He hadn't looked at this picture in years, had forgotten it was even there. With trembling hands, he picked it up. Sarah's smile beamed up at him from the photograph, her dark hair whipping in the wind as she sat on the back of his motorcycle. The memory hit him like a physical blow. The accident, the funeral, the endless nights of guilt and grief that followed. "Duke?" Anna's voice came from the doorway. "Is everything okay? I heard something fall." He quickly shoved the photograph into his pocket, but not before Anna caught the look on his face. His features had hardened, the warmth of earlier replaced by a stone-cold mask. "Fine," he said curtly, turning back to the counter. "Just dropped something." Anna watched him, concern evident in her expression. The easy companionship of the morning had vanished, replaced by a tension she didn't understand. Duke's shoulders were rigid as he aggressively kneaded dough for what she assumed would be biscuits, but his movements were mechanical, his mind clearly elsewhere. She wanted to ask what had happened, what had caused this sudden shift, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she sat quietly in her wheelchair, watching as Duke retreated further into whatever private pain he was experiencing, building walls between them with every passing moment. The kitchen clock ticked steadily as Anna and Duke finished their dinner in uncomfortable silence. The photograph incident from earlier had cast a shadow over the entire day, and Duke had barely spoken 2 words since. Empty plates sat between them, remnants of a meal neither had fully enjoyed. Anna's fingers drummed nervously on her wheelchair's armrest. The tension in the room was suffocating, and she couldn't bear it anymore. "Duke," she said softly, "what happened today? In the kitchen?" Duke's jaw tightened as he stared at his plate. "Nothing happened. I saw your face when you picked up that photograph." Anna's voice was gentle but firm. "Who was she?" The muscles in Duke's neck strained as he swallowed hard. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Anna thought he might get up and leave. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. "Sarah." Her name was Sarah. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled photograph, smoothing it carefully on the table. Anna leaned forward to look at the smiling woman in the picture. "She was my wife," Duke continued, his voice rough. "We were married for 3 years before—" He trailed off, his large hands curling into fists on the table. Anna waited patiently, giving him space to find his words. "It was raining, just like the night I found you." Duke's eyes were fixed on some distant point. "We were on the motorcycle. I should have known better than to ride in that weather, but I was younger then, thought I was invincible." He drew a shaky breath. "The car came out of nowhere. I walked away with a few broken ribs. Sarah didn't make it." Anna reached across the table, her hand hovering near his, but not quite touching. "I'm so sorry, Duke. After that, I couldn't—" He shook his head. "Everything reminded me of her. Our friends, our home, even my own reflection. The Hells Angels, they were an escape. Nobody asked questions there. Nobody expected me to be okay." His voice grew harder. "I could just ride and forget, lose myself in the brotherhood and the chaos." "How long ago was this?" Anna asked softly. 7 years. Duke's shoulders hunched forward. 7 years, and some days it feels like yesterday. Anna's heart ached for him. "It's okay to still miss her, Duke. It's okay to—" "No." Duke stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He snatched the photograph from the table, shoving it back in his pocket. "I don't want to talk about this anymore." "Duke, please!" "I said no." His voice was cold, final. He turned away from her, his broad back like a wall between them. "Some things are better left in the past." Anna withdrew her hand, letting it fall limply into her lap. She watched as Duke began aggressively cleaning up the dishes, his movements sharp and angry. The vulnerability he'd shown moments ago had vanished, replaced by an impenetrable barrier that seemed to grow with each passing second. Slowly, she wheeled herself away from the table, feeling more distant from him than she had since that first rainy night. As she moved toward her room, she could hear the harsh clatter of dishes in the sink, Duke's way of drowning out any possibility of further conversation. In the sanctuary of her room, Anna stared at her latest painting, the colors suddenly seeming dull and lifeless. She hadn't meant to push him so hard, hadn't meant to make him relive his pain. Now she didn't know how to bridge the gulf that had opened between them. The phone's harsh ring cut through the morning silence. Anna wheeled herself to the kitchen counter where Duke's landline sat. She hesitated before picking up, unused to receiving calls here. "Hello? Anna, is that really you?" The familiar voice made her stomach clench. "Rachel!" Anna gripped the phone tighter. Her sister's voice brought a flood of memories, not all of them pleasant. "Where have you been? I've been looking everywhere for you." Rachel's tone shifted from concern to anger. "Someone said they saw you with some biker thug. Are you out of your mind?" Anna's throat tightened. "I'm fine, Rachel. Duke's been helping me." "Duke? You're on a first-name basis with this criminal?" Rachel's voice rose. "You need to come home right now. I have a spare room. You shouldn't be living with some strange man." "He's not strange," Anna defended, but her voice wavered. "And I'm not a child. I can make my own decisions." "Really? Like the decision to disappear for months? To live on the streets?" Rachel's words stung. "Mom would be devastated if she knew—" "Don't." Anna's voice cracked. "Don't bring Mom into this. Then come back to the city, today. I'll send someone to pick you up." Anna closed her eyes, fighting back tears. I need time to think." "What's there to think about? You're my sister. You belong with family, not some random biker." After several more minutes of Rachel's demands, Anna finally hung up. Her hands trembled as she placed the phone back in its cradle. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too confining. She wheeled herself onto the back porch, where the morning sun did little to warm the chill inside her. Rachel's words echoed in her mind. Family. Belonging. But what did those words mean anymore? Her sister's house in the city was pristine, organized, and suffocating. Rachel had always tried to control every aspect of Anna's life, even before the accident. The thought of returning there made her chest tight. But staying here... Anna looked through the window at Duke's kitchen. This past week, despite the tension after his revelation about Sarah, had felt more like home than anywhere else had in years. Duke never treated her like she was broken. He let her be independent, figure things out on her own. The screen door creaked behind her. Duke's heavy footsteps approached, then stopped. "Everything okay?" His voice was gruff but concerned. Anna wiped her eyes quickly. "My sister called." A long pause followed. "She wants you to leave?" "Yes." Anna turned her chair to face him. She thinks you're dangerous. That I'm not safe here." Duke's face hardened slightly. "Maybe she's right." "Don't do that," Anna said firmly. "Don't prove her right by pushing me away." His expression softened. "Listen," he said, leaning against the porch railing. "You've got a place here as long as you want it, but I ain't keeping you prisoner. If you want to go back to your sister's..." He shrugged, but Anna could see the tension in his shoulders. "I don't know what I want," Anna admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Duke nodded slowly. "Well, there's no rush to decide. Like I said, you're welcome here." He straightened up and headed back inside, leaving Anna alone with her thoughts and the weight of the decision before her. The morning light streamed through the window, casting long shadows across Anna's canvas. Her hand trembled slightly as she tried to focus on the landscape she was painting. A scene of Duke's backyard, with its wild flowers and aging fence. But the colors kept blurring together, her mind wandering back to Rachel's words. Duke's heavy footsteps echoed through the house. He'd been pacing all morning, casting worried glances her way whenever he passed the spare room she'd turned into a makeshift studio. The brush slipped from Anna's fingers, leaving an unwanted streak of blue across the canvas. "Damn it," she muttered, reaching for a cloth to fix her mistake. "That looks nice," Duke said from the doorway, his voice unusually gentle. He stepped into the room, his large frame making the space feel smaller. Even with the blue streak. Anna managed a weak smile, but didn't look up. "It's nothing special." "Your sister called again this morning." Duke's words hung in the air between them. Anna's hand froze mid-stroke. "You talked to her?" "No, let the machine get it." He pulled up a chair, sitting down, heavily. "Anna, we need to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about." She began cleaning her brushes with more force than necessary. "That's not true, and you know it." Duke leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You've been avoiding this since yesterday. What did she say to you?" Anna set down her brushes, her shoulders slumping. "She wants me to come back to the city. Says I belong with family, not..." She hesitated. "Not with some dangerous biker?" Duke's voice was tight. Those were her words, not mine. Anna finally turned to face him. "She has a spare room. Says she can take care of me." "And what do you want?" The question hung between them. Anna wheeled herself to the window, looking out at the yard she'd been trying to paint. "I can't keep imposing on you like this, Duke. You've been so kind, but..." "But what?" There was an edge to his voice now. You think you're imposing? That I don't want you here? Look at me. Anna gestured to her wheelchair. I'm broken. I can't even get around properly without help. You deserve better than being stuck taking care of someone like me. Duke stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. That what you think this is? That I'm stuck with you? Aren't you? Anna's voice cracked. Ever since that night in the rain, you've been taking care of me. It's not fair to you. Life ain't fair, Duke growled. But that doesn't mean… I'm leaving tomorrow, Anna cut him off, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Rachel's sending someone to pick me up. The silence that followed was deafening. Duke stood perfectly still, his face unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, cold. If that's what you want? Duke, please understand. But he was already turning away, his broad shoulders rigid. I'll help you pack your things. He paused at the doorway, not looking back. Let me know if you need anything else. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Anna alone with her half-finished painting and the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. The morning sun cast long shadows across Duke's front porch as Anna folded her clothes into a small duffel bag. Her movements were mechanical, each item carefully placed as if prolonging the task might somehow change what was coming. The few possessions she'd accumulated during her stay seemed pitiful now. A handful of clothes, some art supplies, and the memories she'd rather not think about. Through the window, she could see Duke in the yard, tinkering with his motorcycle. He hadn't said more than 2 words to her since yesterday's conversation. The distance between them felt like a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. The sound of tires on gravel made her stomach clench. Rachel's friend was early. Duke's footsteps creaked on the porch boards. Your ride's here, he said, his voice gruff. Anna wheeled herself to the door, her throat tight. I guess this is it then. Duke nodded, not quite, meeting her eyes. His hands, usually so steady when working on engines, fidgeted with his leather vest. Let me help you with your bags. I can manage, Anna said quickly, then regretted her sharp tone. I mean, thank you, but I need to do this myself. He stepped back, giving her space. The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of wild roses from his overgrown garden. Anna had been meaning to help him trim those bushes. Now she never would. The driver, a young man Anna didn't know, started loading her wheelchair into the trunk. Duke hovered nearby, his massive frame casting a shadow over the scene. He looked lost, like a bear unsure of its territory. Duke, Anna began, then faltered. What could she say? Thank you for taking in a stranger? Sorry for leaving? Nothing seemed adequate. You take care of yourself, he muttered, shoving his hands deep into his pockets. If you ever need anything… I know. Anna smiled weakly. You've done more than enough already. The driver cleared his throat. We should get going, miss. Traffic's gonna get bad soon. Duke helped Anna into the passenger seat, his gentle touch at odds with his intimidating appearance. For a moment, his hand lingered on her shoulder, and Anna thought he might say something more. But he stepped back, closing the car door with a soft click. Through the window, Anna watched as Duke's figure grew smaller in the side mirror. He stood in the driveway, a solitary figure against the backdrop of the house that had become her sanctuary. The tattooed bear of a man who'd shown her more kindness than anyone else in years was now just another person she was leaving behind. The car turned onto the main road, and Anna felt something inside her crack. She pressed her hand against the window, as if she could reach back through the glass and grab hold of the peace she'd found here. But Duke's house disappeared around a bend, taking with it the warmth and safety she'd come to know. Duke watched until the car vanished from sight, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The morning sun continued to rise, indifferent to the empty space Anna had left behind. He stood there long after the sound of the engine had faded, alone again in the silence of his yard, surrounded by the wild roses that suddenly seemed to have lost their color. The house creaked under the weight of silence. Duke sat at his kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from him. 3 days had passed since Anna left, but her absence felt like a physical thing, pressing against his chest and making it hard to breathe. He picked up his coffee mug, the chipped blue one he always used, and glanced at the red ceramic cup still sitting in the dish rack. Anna's cup. He couldn't bring himself to put it away in the cupboard. The morning light streamed through the windows she used to keep spotless. Now dust motes danced in the sunbeams, settling on the windowsill where her paints had been. The easel she'd set up in the corner was gone too, leaving behind a clean square on the faded carpet. Duke pushed away from the table and grabbed his leather jacket. Maybe a ride would clear his head. The familiar rumble of his motorcycle usually brought him peace, but lately even that felt hollow. He rode aimlessly through town, past the grocery store where they'd shopped together, past the park where she'd insisted on feeding the ducks despite the cold. Everything reminded him of Anna, her quiet strength, her stubborn independence, the way she'd fill his silent home with gentle humming while she painted. Back at the house, Duke found himself in the spare room, her room. The bed was made with military precision, corners tucked tight like she'd never been there. But the air still held a trace of her lavender soap, and when he closed his eyes, he could almost hear her laugh echoing down the hallway. In the kitchen, he mechanically made dinner for one. The portions felt wrong. He'd gotten used to cooking for two, measuring coffee for two, setting the table for two. Now everything was halved, diminished. That night, sleep eluded him. Duke tossed and turned, his mind replaying their last conversation. He should have said something more. Should have told her how much her presence had changed things, how she'd brought light into his dark corners without even trying. The next morning, Duke found himself staring at the phone number Anna had left, her sister's contact information, just in case. His calloused fingers traced the neat handwriting. The urge to call, just to hear her voice, was almost overwhelming. Instead, he grabbed his keys. The metal felt cool against his palm as he walked to his truck. The motorcycle wouldn't do, not for this. He needed to think, needed the enclosed space to sort through the jumble of emotions he'd been avoiding. As he drove toward the city, Duke gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He didn't know what he'd say when he got there, didn't know if she'd even want to see him. But the thought of her sister's accusations, that he'd somehow taken advantage of Anna, made his jaw clench. The highway stretched before him, a ribbon of asphalt leading toward the city skyline. Each mile marker brought him closer to Anna, and with every passing minute, the ache in his chest grew stronger. He'd lived alone for years before she came into his life. Now, after just a few weeks, he couldn't remember how he'd managed it. The exit sign for Anna's sister's neighborhood appeared ahead. Duke took a deep breath, his hands steady on the wheel despite the uncertainty churning in his gut. He didn't have a plan, didn't know what he'd say. But he knew one thing. He couldn't keep sitting in that empty house, surrounded by the ghosts of her presence, without at least making sure she was okay. Duke parked his truck across the street from a neat 2-story house with trimmed hedges and a perfectly manicured lawn. Everything about it screamed order and control, the complete opposite of his rural home. His heart hammered as he walked up to the front door. A thin woman with Anna's dark hair but none of her warmth answered his knock. Her eyes narrowed with recognition. "You must be Duke," she said, her voice clipped and cold. "Yes, ma'am. I'd like to speak with Anna. She's not here right now." The woman, Anna's sister, crossed her arms. "And frankly, I don't think it's appropriate for you to be here." Duke took a deep breath, fighting down his rising frustration. "Look, I know what you must think of me. Ex-Hell's Angel, living alone in the middle of nowhere. But Anna—" He paused, searching for the right words. "She changed things, made my house feel like a home again." "She doesn't need your charity," her sister snapped. "I can take care of her now. She has family." "It's not about charity," Duke said, his voice growing rough with emotion. "Your sister is one of the strongest people I've ever met. She's got more fight in her than most folks I know who can walk. I don't see her as someone who needs taking care of. I see her as someone who makes my life better just by being in it." The sister's rigid posture softened slightly. "She's been through so much." "I know," Duke said quietly. "So have I. Maybe that's why we understand each other." After a long moment, her sister sighed. "She goes to the park down the street sometimes. Little place with a pond. She likes to watch the water." Duke nodded his thanks and headed back to his truck. The park wasn't hard to find, a small green space with a few benches surrounding a modest pond. And there was Anna, sitting in her wheelchair near the water's edge. His footsteps crunched on the gravel path, and she turned her head at the sound. Her eyes widened. "Duke?" "Hey," he said softly, moving to sit on the bench beside her wheelchair. "Mind if I join you?" Anna's hands fidgeted in her lap. "You shouldn't have come." "Couldn't stay away." Duke watched a pair of ducks glide across the pond. "The house is too quiet without you." "I can't keep depending on you," Anna said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not fair to you." Duke turned to face her fully. "You've got it backwards, Anna. These past few weeks, having you there, it's the first time in years I've felt like myself again. Like maybe I'm not just existing anymore." Tears welled up in Anna's eyes. "I'm scared, Duke. Scared of needing help, of being a burden, of letting myself care about someone and then losing them." "You think I'm not scared too?" Duke's voice was gentle. "Every morning I wake up terrified that this is the day you'll realize you deserve better than a broken-down old biker." A small laugh escaped through Anna's tears. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" "Yeah," Duke agreed, reaching over to take her hand. "But maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe we can figure it out together." Anna squeezed his hand, and for a moment they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunlight dance on the pond's surface. "I miss your cooking," she admitted finally. "The kitchen misses you," Duke replied. "The whole house does." He paused, gathering his courage. "What do you say we try to find a way forward? Together?" Anna turned to him, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I'd like that." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Duke's front yard as he helped Anna out of his truck. Her few belongings sat in a small duffel bag on the back seat, everything she owned in the world. But something had changed between them. The awkwardness of their first days together had been replaced by a comfortable understanding. "Home sweet home," Duke said gruffly, wheeling her up the ramp he'd built for her weeks ago. The wood was already weathered, like it had always been there. Anna smiled, taking in the familiar sight of the modest house. "You painted the shutters," she noticed. The dark green paint was fresh and neat. "Needed something to keep my hands busy while you were gone," Duke admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. House felt too quiet. Inside, everything was just as Anna remembered, but somehow different. Her art supplies still sat in the corner of the living room, untouched since she'd left. Duke hadn't moved them. A few of her paintings hung on the walls, bringing color to the once bare space. "I've been thinking," Duke said as he helped her get settled. "Maybe we both need to stop trying to handle everything alone." Anna looked up at him, surprised by his directness. "What do you mean?" Duke sat down heavily in his worn armchair. "Found this group in town. Meets every Tuesday night at the community center. It's for veterans and people dealing with disabilities." He paused, fidgeting with his leather bracelet. "Thought maybe we could check it out together." Anna's first instinct was to refuse. She'd avoided support groups, convinced they'd only remind her of everything she'd lost. But something in Duke's expression made her hesitate. "You'd go with me?" she asked softly. "Figure we both got stuff to work through," he said. "Might help to hear from others who understand." The community center was a plain brick building with fluorescent lighting and folding chairs arranged in a circle. Duke pushed Anna's wheelchair through the double doors, both of them fighting the urge to turn around and leave. Inside, about a dozen people sat, talking quietly. Some were in wheelchairs like Anna, others bore visible scars or prosthetic limbs. A few looked outwardly fine, but carried themselves with the weight of invisible battles. An older man with a cane spotted them and walked over. "Welcome," he said warmly. "I'm Jim. First time here?" Duke nodded, his hand resting protectively on Anna's shoulder. "Name's Duke. This is Anna." "Grab a spot anywhere," Jim said. "We're just about to start." They found a place in the circle, Duke pulling up a chair next to Anna's wheelchair. As people began sharing their stories, Anna felt something inside her start to unwind. These weren't people looking to fix her or pity her. They were just people trying to find their way, just like her. A young veteran spoke about learning to live with PTSD. An elderly woman described adjusting to life after a stroke. Each story was different, but they all shared a common thread of resilience. Anna felt Duke's hand find hers as they listened. His fingers were rough and warm against her palm. She could feel the slight tremor in them, knowing how hard this was for him too, opening up, being vulnerable. But sitting there, surrounded by people who understood struggle and survival, Anna felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Not the desperate kind that came from wishing things were different, but the steady kind that grew from accepting where you were and knowing you weren't alone. Duke squeezed her hand gently, and she squeezed back. They'd found something here. Not just in each other, but in this room full of strangers who weren't really strangers at all. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow across the wooden table where Anna and Duke sat sharing breakfast. Steam rose from their coffee mugs, and the comfortable silence between them felt different now, easier, like a well-worn blanket. Anna watched as Duke stirred his coffee, his large hands surprisingly gentle with the delicate spoon. The man who had once seemed so intimidating to her now felt like home. His presence brought her a sense of peace she hadn't known she was missing. "Been thinking," Duke said, his deep voice soft in the quiet morning. "Maybe we could clear out that spare room properly, make it into a proper art studio for you." Anna's heart skipped a beat. "You'd do that?" "Already started," he admitted, a slight blush creeping up his neck. "Moved some boxes yesterday. Got good light in there, facing east." She wheeled herself to the window, looking out at the garden Duke had started tending since she'd come back. Fresh herbs grew in neat rows, and wildflowers added splashes of color. "You've changed so much around here," she said. "You changed things first," Duke replied, coming to stand beside her. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "Made this place feel like more than just walls and a roof." Later that afternoon, Anna found herself in the newly cleared spare room. Duke had installed a special easel that could be adjusted to her height in the wheelchair. Her art supplies were arranged on a low table within easy reach. "It's perfect," she whispered, running her hands over the smooth wood of the easel. Duke leaned against the doorframe, trying to hide his pleased expression. Figured you might want to start painting again. Proper-like, not just at the kitchen table. Anna wheeled herself to the windows, taking in the view of the garden and the rolling hills beyond. Something stirred in her chest, that familiar urge to capture beauty on canvas, to transform feelings into colors and shapes. Would you... She hesitated, then gathered her courage. Would you sit for me? Let me paint you? Duke's eyes widened slightly. Me? I ain't exactly what you'd call picture-worthy. You are to me, Anna said softly. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Understanding, acceptance, maybe even love. Duke nodded slowly. He settled into a chair by the window while Anna set up her canvas. Her hands moved with remembered skill as she mixed colors, finding the right shade to capture the warmth in Duke's eyes, the strength in his shoulders, the gentleness that lay beneath his rough exterior. As she painted, Duke talked. He told her about his wife, Sarah, about the accident that took her, about the years of anger and guilt that followed. Anna listened, adding touches of shadow and light to the canvas, letting his story flow into her art. Never thought I'd find peace again, Duke admitted, watching her work. Then you showed up at that bus stop in the rain. Anna paused, brush hovering over the canvas. I never thought I'd find home again, she replied. But here we are. The afternoon light shifted, casting golden highlights across Duke's face. Anna captured them all, the way his beard caught the sun, the tiny crinkles around his eyes when he smiled, the strong lines of his hands folded in his lap. She painted not just what she saw, but what she felt. Safety, belonging, hope. They worked in comfortable silence, broken only by the soft scratch of brush on canvas and the distant song of birds in the garden. This was healing, Anna realized, not the dramatic kind that happened all at once, but the quiet kind that came day by day, moment by moment, in the simple act of being together. The evening settled over Duke's house like a soft blanket, bringing with it a peaceful quiet that felt different from the lonely silence that had haunted these rooms before. Anna sat in her wheelchair by the fireplace, watching the flames dance while Duke finished washing the dinner dishes. The clink of plates and the gentle sound of running water created a homey backdrop that made her heart feel full. Duke dried his hands on a dish towel and made his way to the living room. He'd changed since Anna had painted him that afternoon. Not just his clothes, but something in his demeanor. The walls he usually kept up seemed lower, his eyes softer when they met hers. Tea? He asked, already reaching for the kettle. Please, Anna smiled, watching him move around the kitchen with practiced ease. His large frame, which once seemed intimidating, now brought her comfort. She observed his careful movements as he prepared their evening ritual. 2 mugs, 2 tea bags, waiting patiently for the water to boil. The firelight caught the silver in his beard, and the tattoos on his arms as he brought their mugs over. Setting them on the small table beside Anna, he lowered himself into his favorite armchair, close enough that their knees almost touched. Thank you, Anna said softly, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Not just for the tea, for everything. Duke's eyes met hers, holding something deep and vulnerable. Don't need thanks, he rumbled. Having you here, it's changed things, changed me. Anna's heart quickened at his words. The space between them felt charged with unspoken feelings, like the air before a summer storm. She set her mug down, her hands trembling slightly. I used to think, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, that after the accident nobody would ever... that I'd never... She struggled to find the words. Duke leaned forward, his large hand covering hers. Anna, he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're the strongest person I know, the most beautiful." The word beautiful hung in the air between them. Anna felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes, but these weren't the tears of sadness she'd grown so used to. These were different, full of hope and possibility. "When I first saw you in the rain," Duke continued, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her hand, "I thought I was helping you. Didn't realize you'd end up saving me too." Anna's free hand reached up, hesitant at first, then more sure as she touched his cheek. His beard was soft under her fingers. Duke closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man starved for gentleness. The firelight played across their faces as Anna wheeled herself closer. Duke's eyes opened, meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. She could see everything in those eyes, his pain, his hope, his love. Slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted, Anna leaned forward. Duke met her halfway, one hand coming up to cradle her face with infinite tenderness. Their lips met in a soft, sweet kiss that felt like coming home. All the broken pieces of their past seemed to fade away in that moment, leaving only the warmth of their connection, the rightness of being together. When they finally parted, Duke rested his forehead against hers, his breath shaky. Anna kept her hand on his cheek, amazed at how natural this felt, how right. The fire crackled softly beside them, casting its warm glow over this new chapter in their lives. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Duke's house, now transformed by Anna's presence. Colorful paintings adorned the once bare walls, and the smell of fresh coffee mingled with the scent of paint and turpentine. Anna sat at her makeshift art station by the bay window, her wheelchair positioned perfectly to catch the natural light. Her hands moved confidently across the canvas, adding delicate strokes of blue to her latest piece. Duke watched her from the kitchen doorway, 2 mugs of coffee in his large, tattooed hands. The sight of her working filled him with a warmth he'd never thought he'd feel again. "Morning, beautiful," he said, placing her coffee on the small table beside her easel. "Just in time," Anna smiled, not taking her eyes off her work. "I think this one's almost finished." The painting showed a motorcycle parked beneath a star-filled sky, its chrome details catching moonlight in a way that made it seem alive. Duke leaned down to kiss the top of her head, studying the artwork. "It's something else," he said softly, "just like all the others." The others he referred to were the collection of paintings that had caught Sarah Miller's eye last week. Sarah owned the local art gallery in town and had stopped by their house after hearing about Anna's work from someone at the Veterans Support Group. "The gallery called earlier," Anna said, setting down her brush. "They want to feature my work in next month's showing. Sarah thinks people will connect with the stories behind the paintings." Duke's face broke into a proud grin. "Of course they will. You've got a way of putting feelings on canvas that just speaks to people." Anna wheeled herself back from the easel to get a better look at the finished piece. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," she said, reaching for Duke's hand. "You gave me back my confidence, my purpose." "You had those things all along," Duke replied, squeezing her hand. "I just gave you a safe place to find them again." Over the next few weeks, they worked together to prepare for the show. Duke built custom frames for Anna's paintings, his skilled hands crafting each one with care. Anna selected her best pieces, each one telling a story of their journey together. The stormy night they met, the quiet moments on the porch, the healing they'd found in each other's company. The evening of the gallery showing arrived sooner than they expected. Duke stood in their bedroom, adjusting his tie with uncertain fingers. He'd traded his usual leather jacket for a proper suit, though his beard and tattoos still marked him as different from the typical gallery crowd. "You look handsome," Anna said from the doorway, wearing a deep blue dress that made her eyes sparkle. Very distinguished. Duke turned to her, his breath catching at the sight. "And you look incredible," he said, moving to wheel her towards the truck. The gallery was already bustling when they arrived. Sarah had arranged Anna's paintings in a way that told their story, from the darker pieces that reflected her struggles to the vibrant, hope-filled works she'd created recently. People moved from piece to piece, clearly moved by what they saw. Duke stood back, watching Anna as she spoke with visitors about her work. Her face glowed with confidence and joy as she explained her techniques and shared the meanings behind each painting. Looking around at the walls covered in Anna's art, at the people being touched by her vision, Duke felt his chest tighten with emotion. They'd come so far from that rainy night when he'd found her at the bus stop. Two broken people who'd somehow made each other whole again. The evening after the gallery showing, Duke and Anna sat on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The success of the art show still hung in the air like a sweet perfume, but underneath it, both felt the stirring of deeper questions about their future together. Anna adjusted her position in her wheelchair, her fingers absently tracing the wheel's rim. "Sometimes I wonder if we're crazy," she said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Two broken people trying to build something lasting." Duke shifted in his chair, his large frame casting a long shadow across the wooden boards. "Maybe that's what makes it work," he replied, his voice gruff but gentle. "We understand each other's scars." "But what about your past?" Anna turned to face him, her eyes searching his face. "The Hell's Angels, the life you left behind, does it ever call to you?" Duke was quiet for a moment, considering her question. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. That life, it was an escape, running from the pain of losing Sarah. He paused, swallowing hard. "But with you, I don't need to run anymore." Anna squeezed his hand, feeling the strength in it. "And me? My paralysis isn't going away. There will always be things I can't do, ways I'll need help." "You're the strongest person I know," Duke said firmly. "Your wheelchair doesn't define you any more than my tattoos define me." He gestured to the intricate designs covering his arms. "We're more than our past, more than our limitations." The last rays of sunlight caught the tears gathering in Anna's eyes. "I'm scared sometimes," she admitted. "Scared that one day you'll wake up and realize this is too much, that I'm too much." Duke knelt beside her wheelchair, bringing himself level with her eyes. "Listen to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're not too much. You're everything I never knew I needed." The next morning, Duke woke Anna early, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. "Pack a bag," he said, already loading his truck with supplies. "We're going on an adventure." Anna raised an eyebrow but complied, excitement building as she packed a small suitcase. Duke had already modified his truck to accommodate her wheelchair, making it easy for her to travel with him. As they pulled out of their driveway, the rising sun at their backs, Duke reached over and took Anna's hand. "I want to show you something," he said, steering the truck onto the highway. They drove for hours, the landscape changing from their familiar small town to rolling hills and vast open spaces. Duke pointed out landmarks along the way, ancient trees, hidden valleys, streams that glittered like silver ribbons in the distance. At each stop, he carefully helped Anna from the truck, making sure she could experience each sight fully. They watched eagles soar over canyons, felt the spray of hidden waterfalls, and listened to the wind whisper through ancient forest groves. "This is my gift to you," Duke said as they paused, at a particularly beautiful overlook. "All these places I used to ride through alone, running from my past. Now I get to share them with you, see them new through your eyes. Anna reached up to touch his face, understanding the depth of what he was sharing. These weren't just beautiful places. They were pieces of his journey, now becoming part of their journey together. The world is bigger than our fears, Duke said softly, his hand covering hers. And I want to explore every bit of it with you. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as Anna prepared breakfast, the smell of coffee and toast filling the air. Duke sat at the table, watching her move around the kitchen with practiced ease. Over the past months, they had adapted the space to accommodate her wheelchair, lowering counters and rearranging cabinets until everything was within her reach. "I've been thinking," Anna said, carefully placing 2 plates on the table. Her hands trembled slightly, betraying her nervousness. "About our future together." Duke looked up from his coffee, his expression softening. "What about it? Do you ever think about having a family?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Anna busied herself with buttering her toast, afraid to meet his eyes. Duke was quiet for a long moment, and Anna's heart thundered in her chest. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I used to think that part of my life was over," he admitted. "After Sarah, I couldn't imagine trying again." Anna nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "And now?" "Now?" Duke reached across the table and took her hand. "Now I see possibilities I never thought I'd have again." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But what about you? Is that something you want?" Anna's eyes grew misty. "I always dreamed of being a mother, even before the accident. Afterward, I thought—" She paused, collecting herself. "I thought that dream died along with my ability to walk." "Hey," Duke said softly, moving his chair closer to her. "Your paralysis doesn't define what kind of mother you'd be." "But would it be fair? To a child?" Anna's voice cracked. "There's so much I can't do." Duke's expression grew fierce. "There's so much you can do. I've watched you overcome every obstacle thrown your way. You're the most capable person I know." Anna wiped away a tear. "You really think we could do it? Be parents? Together?" Duke smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I think we could do anything." They spent the morning talking about possibilities. Anna shared her fears about not being able to chase after a toddler or play physical games. Duke listened, offering reassurance and practical solutions. "We could adopt," Duke suggested, his voice gentle. "There are so many kids out there who need a home, need love." Anna's face lit up. "You'd want that?" "A family doesn't have to be blood," Duke said, thinking of his own complicated past. "It's about love, about choosing each other every day." They saw him, moved to the living room, where Anna pulled out her laptop. Together they began researching adoption agencies, reading stories of other families like them, families that didn't fit the traditional mold, but were filled with love nonetheless. "Look at this," Anna said, pointing to a website for a local adoption agency. "They specialize in helping families with disabilities. They even offer counseling and support services." Duke leaned over her shoulder, reading the information. "They have an orientation session next month," he noted. Anna turned to look at him, hope blooming in her chest. "Should we sign up?" Duke's answer was to reach for the phone. "I'll make the call right now," he said, his voice steady and sure. As he dialed the number, Anna watched him, her heart full. They had come so far from that rainy night when he'd found her at the bus stop. Now they were planning a future neither of them had dared to dream of before. When Duke finished the call, he turned to Anna with a smile. "We're registered for the orientation," he announced. "First step toward building our family." Anna reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. They sat together in comfortable silence, both lost in thoughts of the future they would build together. The rumble of motorcycles filled the air as Duke pulled into the parking lot of Joe's Bar and Grill. His hands tightened on the steering wheel of his truck, knuckles turning white. Through the windshield he could see the row of gleaming bikes, familiar machines that brought back a flood of memories. "Are you sure about this?" Anna asked from the passenger seat, her hand resting gently on his arm. Duke nodded, though his jaw remained tight. "It's time." Inside, the bar was dim and smoky. Heads turned as Duke entered, pushing Anna's wheelchair. The familiar faces of his old Hell's Angels brothers stared back at him, some with surprise, others with barely concealed hostility. "Well, look who finally showed his face," a gruff voice called out. Big Mike, Duke's former riding partner, stood up from his seat at the bar. He was still massive, his leather vest stretched across broad shoulders. "The bear returns from hibernation." Duke moved forward, positioning himself protectively near Anna. "Mike," he acknowledged. "Boys." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Anna watched as other bikers shifted in their seats, uncertain how to react to Duke's presence after all these years. "Heard you went soft," another voice spoke up. "Living out in the sticks, playing house." Duke's expression hardened, but his voice remained steady. "Not soft, Tommy. Just found a better way to live." Big Mike stepped closer, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. "You left us hanging, Bear. After Sarah died, you just disappeared. No goodbye, no nothing." "I couldn't stay," Duke admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Everything here reminded me of her. The rides, the brotherhood, it all felt hollow." "We were your family," Mike growled. "You turned your back on family." Anna wheeled herself forward slightly. "Sometimes family means letting someone heal in their own way," she said quietly. The bikers turned their attention to her, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. Duke placed a hand on her shoulder, drawing strength from her presence. "I didn't come here to fight," Duke said. "I came to make peace. What happened with Sarah, it broke me. I needed time, space. I found both, and something else too." He looked down at Anna with a soft expression that made several of the hardened bikers shift uncomfortably. Big Mike studied them both for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, his face softened. "Sarah would have wanted you to be happy," he said gruffly. "She always said you had too big a heart for this life." The tension in the room began to ease. Tommy raised his beer in a silent toast, and other bikers followed suit. Duke felt something inside him start to unravel, a knot of guilt and grief he'd carried for years. "I'm sorry I left the way I did," Duke said, meeting Mike's eyes. "You deserved better than that." Mike nodded, then stepped forward and pulled Duke into a rough embrace. "You're still family, Bear. Different road, maybe, but family all the same." Anna watched as Duke's shoulders relaxed, years of guilt and pain melting away. Other bikers came forward, sharing brief hugs or handshakes, telling stories about Sarah that made Duke both laugh and cry. "You okay?" Anna whispered when Duke finally knelt beside her wheelchair. He smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, the smile reached his eyes completely. "Yeah," he said, taking her hand. "I think I finally am." The morning sun streamed through the windows of Duke's home, now their home, as Anna wheeled herself into the living room. The walls, once bare, now displayed her artwork alongside photographs of their growing family of friends. Duke sat at the kitchen table, going through paperwork with his reading glasses perched on his nose. "I think I've figured it out," Anna announced, her eyes bright with excitement. She placed a folder on the table in front of him. The foundation. I want to call it Wheels of Change." Duke looked up from his papers, a smile tugging at his lips. "Tell me more." "Remember how scared I was when I first ended up on the streets?" Anna's voice was soft but determined. "There are so many others out there like me, people with disabilities who don't have anyone to turn to. We could help them?" Duke pushed his glasses up and reached for the folder. Inside were carefully organized plans, budgets, and program ideas. "You've really thought this through," he said, impressed. "The support group showed me how much difference a community can make," Anna explained, wheeling closer to him. "But not everyone knows where to find help. We could create a network, connect people with resources, housing, medical care." Duke nodded, reading through her notes. "And the art therapy program?" "That's the heart of it." Anna's face lit up. "Art saved me. It gave me purpose when I felt lost. Maybe it could help others, too." Duke reached over and took her hand, his large fingers entwining with hers. "You never cease to amaze me," he said softly. Anna squeezed his hand. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You showed me that accepting help doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." They spent the morning refining her plans. Duke offered practical suggestions from his years of running his mechanic shop, while Anna shared stories from people she'd met at support groups. Their different perspectives merged seamlessly, like two pieces of a puzzle finally finding their fit. "We'll need a space," Duke mused, making notes in the margins. "Somewhere accessible, central." "Actually," Anna smiled, "I already talked to Pastor Mike. The church has that empty building next door. They're willing to let us use it." Duke's eyebrows rose. "You've been busy." "I want to give back," Anna said simply. "All this love and support we've found, it shouldn't be rare. It should be normal." Duke stood up and moved behind her wheelchair, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. Anna leaned back against him, feeling the steady strength of his presence. "What about you?" she asked. "Any dreams you want to share?" Duke was quiet for a moment, his chin resting on her head. "Being here with you. That's already more than I ever dreamed of having again." But, he chuckled at how well she could read him now. "I've been thinking about teaching some basic mechanics to kids with disabilities. Show them they can still work with their hands, create things." Anna turned her head to look up at him, her eyes shining. "That would be perfect. We could add it to the Foundation's programs." "Yeah." Duke's voice was gruff with emotion. "Yeah," Anna confirmed. "We could call it the Bears Workshop." They both laughed, the sound filling their home with warmth. Looking at their plans spread across the table, Anna felt a deep sense of rightness. They weren't just building a foundation, they were building a future, one filled with purpose and possibility. "We're really doing this," she said softly. Duke kissed the top of her head. "Together," he agreed, "every step of the way." The evening settled softly around Duke and Anna as they sat together on their front porch. The golden light of sunset painted the sky in warm hues, casting long shadows across their yard. Anna's wheelchair was positioned next to the old wooden rocking chair where Duke sat, his large frame somehow looking more relaxed than it had in years. The sweet scent of honeysuckle drifted on the breeze, coming from the vines Anna had planted along the porch railings months ago. They'd taken root and flourished, just like their relationship. "Remember that first night?" Anna asked, her voice gentle. "When you found me at the bus stop?" Duke nodded, his beard hiding a small smile. "You looked like a drowned cat." He paused, his eyes growing distant. "I almost drove past, you know. Old habits and all that." "But you didn't," Anna said, reaching over to touch his arm. Her artist's fingers traced one of his tattoos, a reminder of his Hell's Angel days that now seemed like another lifetime ago. "Couldn't," Duke admitted. "Something about you just couldn't leave you there in the rain." Anna smiled, remembering her own hesitation that night. "I was so scared to trust anyone back then. Thought accepting help meant I was weak." "Look at you now," Duke said proudly. "Running a foundation, helping others. You're the strongest person I know." The breeze picked up, rustling through the trees. Anna watched as a pair of cardinals flitted between branches in their front yard. She'd painted them last week, capturing their vibrant red feathers against the green leaves. "You changed too," she said softly. "When I first met you, you barely spoke 2 words together. Now look at you, leading workshops, mentoring kids." Duke shifted in his chair, still uncomfortable with praise even after all this time. "They just need someone to believe in them, like you believed in me." Anna wheeled herself closer to his chair. "We believed in each other. That's what made the difference." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun sink lower on the horizon. The air was filled with the gentle sounds of evening, crickets starting their nightly chorus, a distant wind chime tinkling in the breeze. "Sometimes," Anna said, "I think about how different things would be if you hadn't stopped that night, if you'd just kept driving." Duke's hand found hers, his calloused fingers wrapping around her smaller ones. "Don't need to think about that. We're here now." Anna squeezed his hand, feeling the strength and gentleness in his grip. "Yes, we are." The last rays of sunlight caught the silver in Duke's beard and the quiet joy in Anna's eyes. They'd both been broken when they met. Him hiding from his past behind a tough exterior, her struggling with her disability and fear of being a burden. But somehow, in finding each other, they'd found themselves too. They held hands as the day faded into dusk, their fingers intertwined like their lives had become. No words were needed in that moment, just the peaceful understanding that in each other they'd found something beautiful and real. The crickets sang louder as evening settled in, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Duke and Anna remained on the porch, their hands clasped together, 2 souls who had discovered that sometimes the most unexpected meetings can lead to the most precious bonds. The small chapel buzzed with quiet excitement as guests filled the wooden pews. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the aisle where Duke stood, looking almost uncomfortable in his pressed black suit. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his usually unruly hair had been tamed for the occasion. His hands fidgeted with his tie, a gesture that betrayed his nerves. Members of Duke's old motorcycle club sat alongside veterans from his support group, an unlikely mix of leather jackets and formal wear. On the other side, artists from Anna's gallery and members of her disability advocacy group chatted quietly. Even Anna's sister sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, their relationship mended over months of careful reconciliation. The small church had been modified to ensure easy wheelchair access. White ribbons and wildflowers decorated the ends of each pew, Anna's artistic touch evident in every detail of the decoration. When the music began to play, not the traditional wedding march, but a gentle acoustic song, all heads turned toward the chapel doors. Anna appeared, radiant in her wedding dress, which had been specially designed to complement her wheelchair. The dress was simple but elegant, with delicate lace details that caught the light as she moved. Her dark hair was crowned with a circlet of small white flowers, and her eyes shone with joy. Duke's breath caught in his throat at the sight of her. Gone was the rain-soaked woman he'd found at the bus stop all those months ago. In her place was someone who radiated confidence and love, her smile bright enough to light up the entire chapel. As Anna made her way down the aisle, she passed faces both familiar and new, people who had become part of their shared life. The local gallery owner who'd first showcased her artwork, the veterans who'd found hope through Duke's mentoring, the children from their adoption support group who waved excitedly as she passed. When Anna reached the altar, Duke stepped forward to stand beside her wheelchair. His hands were steady now as he took hers, his tattooed fingers gentle against her artist's hands. The pastor smiled warmly at them both before beginning the ceremony. "We gather here today," the pastor began, "to celebrate not just the union of two people, but the triumph of love over adversity." Duke's voice was gruff with emotion as he spoke his vows, words that spoke of protection, support, and unwavering devotion. "Anna," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed chapel, "you showed me that strength isn't about being tough on the outside. It's about having the courage to open your heart." Anna's eyes glistened with tears as she delivered her own vows. "Duke, you saw me when I felt invisible. You helped me find my way back to myself. With you, I'm not defined by what I can't do, but by what we can do together." As they exchanged rings, simple bands that symbolized their enduring commitment, the afternoon sun caught the stained glass windows just right, showering them in a rainbow of colors. Duke knelt beside Anna's wheelchair, bringing himself to her eye level as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. The chapel erupted in applause and cheers. Through tears of joy, Anna looked up at Duke, and he gazed back at her with profound tenderness. In that moment, they both knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning of their journey together. The road ahead stretched out before them, full of possibilities they were ready to explore hand in hand. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.